All right, here we go. So we are restarting our series on Pirkei Avos, which lands us towards the end of the third chapter, which is where we left off a little over a year ago, a little less than a year ago, probably. And we once again will be learning Pirkei Avos based on the commentary of the Midrash Shmuel, Rav Shmuel di Uzida. Rav Shmuel di Uzida was I guess, 16th century rabbi in Tzfat, in the heyday of Tzfat, hanging out with the likes of Rabbi Yosef Cairo and the Arizal and the Mabit, and some just really unbelievable time and place in our history. And his contribution to, I think he was a Rosh Yeshiva maybe, and also a Kabbalist, and he wrote a lengthy commentary on Avos called Midrash Shmuel. He also wrote a commentary on the book of Ruth, on Megillas Rus, which we referred to a little bit in our series on Rus. I think that was called Igeres Shmuel, the letter of Shmuel. He also has a commentary on Megillas Esther, which we have now, I think, and was recently printed, I believe. I love it. And he brings many different approaches. He draws on different other commentaries and then offers his own insights and often very novel readings of the Mishnayos. So we start with what I'm calling Mishnah 17, Yud Zayin. And I say that I'm calling it that because actually I didn't see anyone else call it that. But on Sefaria, it's listed as Mishnah 15 of the chapter. In the Art Scroll, it's Mishnah 19. And this is somewhere in between, is to call it 17. And I'm really calling it 17 because we called the last one 16 and the one before that 15 a year ago. So really we're just going in order. And the Mishnayos in this chapter, in the chapters of Avos, are broken up differently by different people, and that's how you end up with different numbers. Okay, so here we go. Our Mishnah begins, Hakol Tzafui. Everything is seen or foreseen. The Harishus Nesuna, and permission is granted. Uvitov ha'olam nidon, and the world is judged with goodness. V'hakol lefi rov hamasa, and everything is based on or in accordance with rov hamasa. Either here the translation of Safari is the preponderance of works, or the majority of works, or the majority of actions, or something like that. So we'll see different possibilities of what that last line could mean. We'll see different possibilities of what the first clauses can mean too. But that's the simple reading of the Mishnah. What it means is not simple at all. So we'll begin with the Rambam, with Maimonides. So the Rambam, in his commentary to the Mishnah, understands that this Mishnah is dealing with one of the most fundamental questions that we have in Jewish philosophy, which is what we refer to as the Yediyah versus Bechira question, the foreknowledge of God versus our free choice. And the Mishnah is telling us, Hakol Tafui, everything is foreseen. God knows exactly what we're going to do. And yet, the Mishnah tells us Harishus Nesuna, but yet we still have free will. And those are two ideas that seem to be contradictory, because if God knows what we're going to do, so it means it's already determined what we're going to do. So how could we then have free will to choose what we are going to do? And so the Rambam writes in his commentary on the Mishnah that he says, despite what it might seem like everything's foreseen, but still, Harishus Nesuna, still we have free will. It is within our hands to choose whether to do good or evil. Nothing is forcing us, and therefore, because it's so then the Mishnah goes on and tells us the world is judged with goodness, meaning we can be judged. There is reward and punishment, and there's reward for the righteous. There's opportunity for reward because we do have free will, and Hakol lefi rov hamasa, and all is based on the majority of our actions, that which a person gets involved in, that which a person spends their life doing. So the more that they do, the more that they are rewarded. And in fact, the Rambam says something interesting. He says what it's telling you is more actions is more important than more results or equal results. In other words, he says, this is what he says. He says it's not the same thing to give $100, let's say, whatever, zehuvim, gold coins to tzedakah in one shot, as to give it 100 times $1 at a time. And and what the idea is that, right, in the end of the day, I gave the same amount of tzedakah. I gave $100. So what difference does it make if I give it all in one shot or I give it in many shots, in 100 different shots? And what the Rambam, he's reading into this Mishnah, that taking into account is also the consistency and the constant involvement in mitzvos, even if you get the same result, but being involved in tzedakah, let's say, has an impression on a person. And if you're doing one shot and then you go and do other things for the rest of the year, so then it's not as impactful on the person as doing it in multiple events, multiple givings. So, and that's Hakol Lefi Rov HaMaseh. The more a person does, the more a person is involved in mitzvos, the better their judgment will be. Now, but getting back to the fundamental question here, so the Rambam here doesn't really address it in too much detail in terms of how to resolve the contradiction. He kind of leaves it as just, the Mishnah is telling you it's not a contradiction. At the same time that God can know and foresee what we're going to do, he also gives us the free will to choose what that is. Now, the Midrash Shmuel elaborates on this Rambam and explains what he thinks the Rambam means. And he says, the truth is, before we see what the Midrash Shmuel says, the Rambam does address this question elsewhere as well. In the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, which is his magnum opus in the Laws of Tshuva, so the Rambam there poses this question as well. And his answer there is, first of all, that he says this: the answer is wider than the land and than the sea, and there's many great fundamentals and tall mountains that are dependent on this, meaning is a very lofty question. But you just have to know, he says, that when we say that God knows something, so his knowledge is not independent of him like it is for us. For us, we have us, and then we have what we know. This is what he says. But he says him, when it comes to God, him and his knowledge are really one thing. And we can't really comprehend what that is. And just like we can't understand fully the concept of God and his existence and his definition, and it's not really within our intellect to grasp that. So just as we can't really grasp the full concept of what God is, we also cannot fully grasp his knowledge and understand what it means that he knows something. But what we can know is just because God knows something, whatever that is, it doesn't mean that type of knowledge doesn't preclude the possibility of us having free choice. And it seems based on those comments that the Midrash Shmuel over here tries to explain what the Rambam means. And the Midrash Shmuel says that he kind of poses the question in the following terms. He says, you might say that if God knows, so then it's for sure going to happen. And if it's for sure going to happen, so then I don't really have the choice. On the other hand, if it's if he doesn't for sure know, then that's saying that God lacks some level of knowledge and perfection. And and so it's a very fundamental question that that it gets a nice amount of discussion. But he says, listen to what I'm going to tell you and contemplate it. He says it's emes bli safek. It's true without any doubt. And that is because to try to think and understand what it means that God knows something is completely foolish. Rather, says the Midrash Shmuel, what we should know is that he knows, just like we know that he exists. And if somebody asks you, how does his knowledge work? We should tell them that we have no sense of what that is, just like we don't have a real sense of what God is and his perfection and to a full grasp on God's what God is. So too we can never fully grasp God's knowledge. And again, it seems that this is really what the Rambam was saying in his Mishnah Torah in the laws of Tshuva. And he says you have to understand that all our actions are within our domain to choose whether we want to be a tzaddik, we want to be righteous or not. And we're not compelled in any way by God. And that's when we just can't fully comprehend what it means that God knows. And he says, it seems that the Rambam doesn't really answer the question. He just says that the answer is that we can't really grasp what that means. That's the answer. Yeah. How could it be that the Mishnah is telling us that God has foreknowledge of what we're going to do and we have free will? How can those two things coexist? The answer is, it's a good question. The answer is we can't fully understand, and that's part of our limitations of understanding God, just like we can't understand God's makeup and we also can't understand God's knowledge. But just because we don't understand what it means that God knows something doesn't mean that these two things can't coexist. That's in a nutshell what the Midrash Shmuel says to explain the Rambam. But he goes on, he says, the truth is, I don't think there's any question here in the first place. I don't think it's a contradiction at all. And that is because absolutely God can know exactly what a person is going to do, how they're going to turn out in their life. And in no way does that mean that we are compelled to become that person. It is us who choose. And we have free will in everything that we do. And the answer, the way that it can be understood is because God is not bound by time. God is not bound by time. And there's no before and after and what one is going to do later and what one did in the past. God is beyond time and sees all times, all history in one shot. And this is what the Midrash Shmuel suggests. Then he says, the truth is, I found this later after I wrote this in the writings of Rav Moshe al-Mushnino, and he says that the Rav Moshe al-Mushnino gave the following analogy. If a person sees somebody presently running, so it means that if I see a person running, then they have to run. It has to be that they're running because they are running. So there's no possibility that the person will not be running because they are. So he says, we're not going to say, therefore, if I see them running, that they have no choice whether to run or not. Just because I know that they are presently running doesn't mean that they don't have a choice whether to run or not. They are running because they chose to run. And he says, just like our knowledge that somebody is doing something is not forcing them to do that thing, so God's knowledge that somebody is doing something is not forcing them to do that either. And And because there's no time before God, God sees past, present, and future all at the same time. So anything that we do is like God seeing it in the present. It's God seeing it as it's happening, because it is all happening before him at the same time. And again, we who live bound by time can't fully grasp that. We can come back to the same point, that it's difficult for us to grasp because we are bound by time. But God, who is beyond time, so everything is happening at the same time for him. And he says that this is really what the Mishnah is saying when it says Hakol tzafui. All is seen in the present tense, meaning God is seeing everything at the same time. God is seeing everything presently, and yet we have the choice of what to do, and therefore b'tov ha'olam nidon. Therefore, we are judged based on our goodness, and hakol lefi rov hamaseh, and everything. So here, actually, he has another suggestion. Again, the simple reading is we're judged based on our deeds. It's a continuation of how we are judged. Another possible reading is that it works. It's explaining how this works. Hakol lefi rov hamaseh would mean it all works through his great deeds, his great abilities that we can't understand. So this hakol lefi rov hamaseh, another way to read it, is it's not explaining anything about our judgment, but rather it's explaining how it could be that God foresees everything and that we have free will. You know how it works? Hakol lefi rov hamaseh. It's according to God's great abilities. And he quotes the verse in Yeshaya, in Isaiah, I think it is, where it says, "Lo ki lo dirachai darchem v'lo machshavosai machshavosechem." That that God says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, really making this point that we don't think in the same way. We don't have the same ability to think in the same way. We are totally different in scale, and yeah, we don't have a full grasp of it. But either, again, the two explanations, one is just we throw up our hands and say we don't understand, and that's the answer. The answer is we can't fully comprehend God's knowledge. And the other is to give a little bit of an explanation for what is it that we don't comprehend. It's that God sees everything all at once, past, present, and future. Because God is beyond time, and yet he's even that which we do presently at any moment. We have free will to do that, and the idea that God sees that happening before it happens is no contradiction to that. Okay, so that's taking this Mishnah and understanding that it is dealing with this deep philosophical question, which I think is certainly the most simple reading of the Mishnah. Then the Mishnah Shmuel he continues, and he brings a number of other possible readings of the Mishnah. So we'll call this approach number 2. That would be approach number 1, that it's saying, Hakol tzafui, everything is foreseen, if our reshus nesuna, and yet we have free will. Approach number 2 would go as follows. Hakol tzafui means that God sees everything that we do. Not that God foresees everything, but God sees everything. Everything we do, God sees. God knows about it. Now, a human king, if he sees someone transgress his word, so this person breaks the law, bring them to the palace to be punished, to be executed, whatever the king decides. The results are immediate. But when it comes to God, even though he sees everything that we do, still harishus nesuna, permission is granted, meaning he allows us to continue, and he doesn't just immediately punish us. Rather, on the contrary, he judges us favorably. He judges us with goodness, and And why is that? And how is that? By looking at the majority of deeds, meaning that if a person's deeds are bad, or majority bad, so and the minority are good, so then the God rewards us in this world, and we don't have good in the next world. That means we didn't do our job here. Certainly, if we have majority sins, majority averos, and minority mitzvos, so then we kind of failed our mission. And yes, he'll give us whatever reward we're going to get already in this world, and then the next world it won't be pleasant. But if we have majority merits and minority sins, so then yes, we might suffer in this world to cleanse us and prepare us for a better world to come. And that's Hakol if it all goes according to the majority of what we have, but the way that but basically that God waits to judge us first. And so the Mishnah would read like this: God sees everything we do, but he doesn't punish immediately. Rather, he gives us a chance. He gives us permission to do teshuvah, to return, to change, and therefore, and therefore, he's judging us with goodness. He's giving us a chance, and then finally, though, at the end of the day, it's going to be based on the majority of our deeds, how we comported ourselves. Another approach, Hakol Tzafui, everything is seen. Everything can be seen by us, meaning everything we need to know is available to us. Hashem gives us a Torah, and in the Torah, it tells us how we need to live, how we are supposed to live. And Hakol Tzafui, it's all seeable before us. And like the verse says, God says to us, the Torah says, Re'eh, you should see, I've given before you Esachayim Besatov, I've given you life and good, Besama Besara, and I've given you death and evil. And I've given you the opportunity for good because I've given you the Torah. And then what does it say? It says, Ubacharta B'chayim, you should choose life, right? Famous verse, choose life. And that's what the Mishna is telling us. The Mishna is telling us, Hakol Tzafui, everything is visible, everything is available for us. And by the way, I'm sure y'all remember from last class on Pirkei Avos a year ago that the previous Mishnah talked about how God gave us a kli chemda, a very desirous gift, the Torah. And so this is a continuation of that, perhaps. And it's telling you, right? And he points out, right? It doesn't start like many Mishnah say, Hu Haya Omer, he used to say, which is like a new start, a new topic. No, there's a continuation of the previous topic. In the last Mishnah, it said that we are dear to him, that God is giving us a kli chemda, this desirous gift of the Torah. And then it says, Hakol Tzafui, it's all available. It's all there. And you can look there for what to do. Barashus Nasuna, and permission is granted, meaning we have free will. Uvacharta b'chayim, you should choose life. Now, he says, as the Mishnah continues, he says, now somebody might wonder that there are teachings of the sages that were judged by the majority of the world. So it could be that the majority of people are sinning and only a minority are good. And we'll ask sort of the question that Avraham Avinu asked, that will the righteous have to suffer as a result of the wicked? So he says, V'tova olam nidon, the world is judged with goodness, meaning no, everybody gets their own judgment, that everybody will get what they deserve. And when we say, actually, he says, when the sages say it goes by the majority, it's only for good. if the majority are good, so then the wicked, they're granted extra time. But so the good can be kind of elevated by the wicked can be elevated by the righteous. But the other way, no. The righteous will not be taken down by the wicked, and and then it concludes Hakol lefi rov hamaseh. It all goes by the majority of deeds, meaning another chesed, an additional kindness that God does, which is that even if the wicked outnumber the good, and therefore we don't have a majority good, and the wicked are bound to suffer as a result. But even if there's less tzaddikim than Rishayim, there's fewer of the righteous than the wicked. But we could still tip the scales by our deeds, as long as our deeds, even if we're fewer, but as long as our deeds outweigh the deeds of the wicked. So God looks upon those deeds, and rather than on the numbers of people, and based on those deeds, will continue to judge the world favorably. So to just restate this approach, so the beginning is a little bit easier. Hakol tzafui, everything is visible to us. Everything is available to us in the Torah to see how we're supposed to live. And reshus nesonim, we have free will to choose good and to choose life. Ubacharta b'chaim, we should choose life. Now, and also the world is judged in for goodness, meaning the way that God sets up the scales really is in our favor. That or in favor of mankind. That God will, if you have majority righteous, He'll go with that. If you have majority wicked, he won't go with that. He'll let the righteous still. The righteous will still get what won't be affected by the majority wicked. This is a suggestion. There might be other understandings, but and not only that, but it goes by rov hamasa. Even if we have majority deeds that are good, and although we don't have majority people that are good, but if the deeds of the good outweigh the deeds of the wicked, then that also can tilt the scales. Then he has actually one more interesting approach, which ties into something we learned in Rus. He says another way to read those final words, Hakol lefi rov hamaseh, it's telling you what does that mean? It's an expression again of how God judges us with goodness. So he says, we know that we can only succeed in this world with God's help. We have a Yetzer Hara, we have an evil inclination. He's very strong, he's very feisty, and really we can only succeed against him if God helps us. So we might therefore not deserve as much reward from God because we didn't really earn it as much. So the Mishnah says, no, it's lefi rov hamaseh. It's whoever's doing the majority of the work. We're doing the majority of the work to do good. God helps us in that, but when we do something good, yes, we need God's assistance, but we are considered the ones who are doing the majority, and therefore we're still deserving of reward, right? We talked about this a little bit in Rus, where Boaz gave Rus a blessing that God should pay her in full, and we explained that most, in general, somebody. It's a chesed, it's a kindness that God pays a person in full, because we only can succeed with God's help, and yet God pays us in full as if we did it ourselves. But Rus, who converted, she didn't have that siyata dishmaya. She didn't have that heavenly assistance to become who she became. That she did on her own, and therefore Boaz says, God should pay your payment in full because it was completely earned without any help. That was something we mentioned in Rus. So that's similar over here. We're saying it's a chesed, it's a kindness of God that Hakol lefi rov hamaseh. whoever does the majority of the work gets rewarded in full. Since although we need siyata dishmaya, we need heavenly assistance to be able to overcome our inclinations in this world, but yet God rewards us in full, as if, because he says you did the majority, you get fully rewarded. Okay. Okay, I think that's good for now for this Mishnah. He has again a couple more approaches, but I want to leave time for the next Mishnah. So just to sum up, so the Mishnah said, "Hakol tzafoi v'reshus nesuna." Everything is seen, and but permission is granted. So the first approach we discussed was God foresees everything, but yet we have free will, and that's not a contradiction, either because we don't understand, we just don't know what it means that God knows. It's beyond us to understand that, or that God is beyond time, and so it's like he's seeing it in the present, and just like when we see someone in the present, it doesn't mean that they are compelled to do that act. So too, when God sees something in the present, doesn't mean that we are compelled to act in a certain way. God knows what we're going to do, and yet we have free will. That's one approach. Approach number two was that God sees everything that we do, and yet Harashus Nasuna, he gives us a chance. Doesn't punish us immediately if we do something wrong, like a human king might, but he gives us a chance and judges us favorably in that he gives us he gives us a chance to do teshuvah, and finally we said that hakol tzafoi, everything is seen by us, everything is visible to us. What to do? We have a Torah tells us what to do. Harashus Nasuna, we have free will, and it's up to us to choose b'charta b'chaim, to choose life, to choose a good way of life. Okay, moving on to the next Mishnah. Okay, and I have it as Mishnah Yudches, Mishnah number 18. And again, in different versions, it's listed as different Mishnahs. And now it begins, Hu Haya Omer. He used to say, and we list off a whole list of things. Hakol Nasung Be'eravon. Everything is given. Here they say against a pledge. We might say everything is given as collateral. Umitsuda prusa al kol hachayim, and there is a net spread out over all the living. Hachanus pesucha, the store is open. V'achenvani mekif, and the storekeeper either lends on credit, or it could be he goes around. We'll see. V'apinkas pasuach, the ledgers are open, or the ledger is open. V'ayad kosavis, the hand is writing. Whoever wants to borrow can come and borrow. And the collectors go around all day, every day. And they take payment from people, whether either with the person's knowledge or without the person's knowledge, or with the person's consent or without the person's consent, different ways to translate that. When they have what to rely on, that dinding emes, and the judgment is true, and everything is prepared for the banquet. Okay, so a very enigmatic Mishnah, kind of mysterious, not very clear what it's trying to tell us at face value. So we're going to hopefully have time in the 8 minutes that remain to share two approaches. The first is as follows. Midrash Shmuel says, if you read in Parshas Pirkei, which we read not too long ago, where it says, "Im b'chukosai teilechu," if you walk in my statutes, "Ves mitzvosai tishmeru," and you guard my mitzvos, and you do them, so then it says, "V'nasati geshmeichem b'itam," then I'll give you rain. So if you do the mitzvos, so then I'll provide for you. So he says, somebody might say, well, it's going to take me a while to get through all the mitzvos. I'm not going to get rewarded with rain and sustenance for a while. It's basically impossible, because by the time I get through all those mitzvos, I'm going to be older than the oldest person to ever live, and it's never going to happen. So So what's the point? And I'm never going to see that reward that's promised. So that's why the Mishnah says, no, it's not how it works. Everything is given for a collateral. And and the way that he interprets this is that all we have to do is give a little bit to show that we're going to give more. It's like, if somebody wants to buy something on credit, so they have to make a down payment, a small down payment. Sometimes it shows that they're going to pay up later. So we say, God, we're planning to do all the mitzvahs, and we're trying, and but it's going to take some time, and in the meanwhile, all we have to do is give a collateral. We give a mitzvah, one mitzvah, he says, because one mitzvah leads to another mitzvah, and once we get the ball rolling, so then already God gives us pleasantness in this world, and however, we have to be aware that it's not so easy. Just because we did one mitzvah, just because we started doing mitzvahs, we always have to be on guard, because there's mitzuda prusal ka'achayim. There's a net spread out over us. There's traps out there. There is the yetzer hara. There's the evil inclination, and we always have to be on guard and never assume that we have to stop working on ourselves and improving, because that's when we're liable to slip up, and that's the trap that the Mishnah talks about, and he says, and the store is open, meaning the store is open, and not only is the store open, but the seller goes around selling his wares. He's makif. He understands in this approach it means to go around. He goes around, and what that means is it's the yetzer hara. The yetzer hara. The world is open. There's a whole world out there, a world of temptation, a world of pleasures and distractions from what's important, and the store is open. Whatever we want to buy, we can buy. Whatever pleasures we want to tap into, we could. And not only that, but the yetzer hara goes around. He tries to get us wherever we might be. And he's the storekeeper in this case. And so wherever we are, we have to continue to be on guard. And not only that, but within the analogy, I guess we're saying, like, just because the storekeeper's out doesn't mean that the store is a free for all. You can just walk into the store and take whatever you want, because even there the ledger's open, and the hand is writing, and everything is recorded what we do, and it's all an analogy for taking care not to get too involved in the physical pleasures and the materials of this world, and lose track of what is important, which is our connection to God and our spiritual growth. And you might say, well, if somebody doesn't have money, then they can't engage in pleasures of this world. Yetzer hara says, don't worry. If you want to borrow money, you can borrow money. Meaning, the Yetzer hara says, I'll make sure that you can that anybody who wants to can engage in the physical pleasures of this world. And as a result, the gabayim, the collectors, they go around all day, and they accept payment, meaning they dole out punishment for people's sins, and it's whether a person sinned deliberately, midaito, vishalom midaito, whether with knowledge, whether without knowledge, and they have what to rely on, because even if a person sins because they didn't know, but ignorance isn't always an excuse, because if we had opportunity to learn and we passed it up, so that's our fault as well, and we should have learned more. And but it closes, and the judgment is righteous. But everything is prepared for the meal, meaning ultimately the meal here is the world to come, and any suffering that we have in this world as a result of our actions, ultimately it's for our good, because that will allow us to experience a better world to come. Okay, that's one reading of this Mishnah. And then there's a second reading, which maybe is a little bit of a more positive spin. And it goes like this. Everything is given with a ravon. So a ravon also is the idea. The word collateral also comes from this, but of guarantor. That and it's referring to the Torah. The Torah is given to us, and we are to be guarantors for each other. We have the concept of arevim zelazeh. We're all responsible for each other. We're all guarantors for each other. Each Jew is responsible for the conduct of every other Jew, and that can make it challenging to succeed, because I'm not only responsible for my own actions, I'm also responsible for others. And that's the net that's spread out all over all of life. We're all bound together, and we are responsible for each other. But the store is open, and the storekeeper is lending on credit. That's how you understand it. The storekeeper is lending on credit, meaning that even though we're responsible for each other, and therefore, if the world is sinning, maybe God says that's it. But no, the store is open. The world is open. The world is available to us for God he continues to do good for us and give us a good place to be. And he does it on credit, even if we're not always deserving. But the storekeeper, in this case, God, lends on credit. And but the ledger is always open, because we can never quite pay back what we owe God for all the goodness that he does for us, all that he gives us. A person should never think that I finally paid him back for all that he's given me, because that will not happen. That's the Mishna saying. The ledger is always open, but yet we can continue to borrow. Whoever wants to borrow can come and borrow, because one might think, I haven't paid back God for what he gave me, for all that he's bestowed upon me up till now. How can I ask for more? How can I continue to pray and beseech God for more? But God is ready to give us more. He quotes the verse that we read in Ashrei, Poseach es yadecha, God open your hand, umaspia l'chol chai ratzon, and he provides for all the living that which they desire, meaning even if they don't ask for it, God knows what we desire, and he will, we might be too embarrassed to ask for it, but he will still provide for us. And that's what it's telling us here, that whoever wants to borrow can borrow, meaning don't be embarrassed to ask for more, as long as we're trying to do our part. And and the collectors, the Gabayim, are going around every day. So the first approach, we said, that means they go around punishing. That's what I meant. But this is much more positive. The collectors here are the angels who collect our mitzvos. The collectors go around every day collecting our mitzvos and bringing them up to God and showing them to God all our good deeds. And this is what they're trying to pay you back for all that you bestowed upon them. And they take them from a man, midaito v'shalom midaito. Whether we did the mitzvah on purpose, or whether, even if we did it by accident, they bring before God. Meaning, even if we didn't intend to do a mitzvah, or we didn't do it with the right focus, but still they'll bring that mitzvah before God. And even if we didn't plan to do it, we dropped some coins and they ended up by a poor person, even that they'll bring before God. And we have what to rely on, meaning that's part of the way that God judges us for the positive, meaning that the angels who bring the mitzvahs before God, even the ones that we didn't do on purpose, or even that we didn't plan to do, or that we were even against our will, but we did them, and there's what to rely on, that those count. Vadin ding emes, and the judgment is true. And all this again prepares us for that ultimate seuda, that meal. So to quickly sum up, two approaches here in terms of this, again, very enigmatic and just unclear Mishnah. What it's trying to teach us. One approach is that Hakol nasun be'eravon. God gives everything to us as collateral, meaning that we just have to give a little collateral, and we do one mitzvah, and that can lead to many other mitzvahs. We don't have to do all the mitzvahs to start receiving reward from God, just one. But we always have to be on guard for the Yetzer Hara, and he goes around. The store is always open, and he's going around trying to tempt us, and the collectors are therefore going to take retribution against us, and that's fair, and it's a true judgment, but it's for our ultimate good that we'll be able to benefit more in the next world. And then the second approach, that we are responsible for each other. The Torah is giving be'eravon, that we are to be guarantors for each other. This creates a net over all of us, sort of almost entraps us, but still, God continues to provide for us. The store is open. The storekeeper lends on credit, and we are constantly trying to pay him back, but we will never completely pay him back. That's why the ledger is always open. But we can continue to ask for more from God. Whoever wants to borrow can borrow. We can continue to ask, and the gabayim, the collectors, come along and collect our mitzvahs, bring them before God, and whether we did the mitzvahs on purpose or by accident or against our will, even those we can count for us, and all this will help prepare us for that great Suda, that great banquet and feast in the world to come. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rabbi.